Good morning. When I was a young girl, my sister and I were trying to raise some money to go to a youth conference, and so my grandparents hired us to do some things around their house to try to help us earn some money. I remember we painted their kitchen. I remember painting out the outside of their house, cleaning all the windows inside and outside, and the biggest job that they had us do was cleaning their basement. Let me tell you, living in a home for several decades and you sure accumulate quite a pile of junk down there. Well, I remember that in the very back of their basement, there were several rows of shelves. And under those shelves, we found some old paint cans. And when I say old, I mean old. They probably were there from when they had originally painted and moved in the house. Those cans were so rusty. You know, the paper that usually wraps around them and you can see, like the brand of paint or what color it is, or whatever, that had completely worn away. There was nothing on there. And then the metal handle you carry it with, the bottom and the sides of the can were completely rusted. What happened next, I will never forget. My sister and I each grabbed 2 buckets of paint and lifted them to take them out to the junk pile. But those cans were so old and the bottom was so rusted that when we lifted those cans, the bottom completely separated from the sides of the paint cans, and the paint that was left inside ran all over, gushing all over the floor and all surrounding the other cans that were still there. What a mess. And now we had more to clean up. That story reminds me of a biblical truth, a truth about bitterness. Bitterness is like that paint inside those rusty cans. It was hidden inside of it. My sister and I couldn't see the paint, but when we lifted those cans, what was hiding inside was revealed. Bitterness is often hidden from people around you. But if you let it stay in for too long, it will eventually rot and spill out all around. Bitterness, if left inside, will eat you up from the inside out. Proverbs 14:30. A sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy the rottenness of the bones. When we envy others, maybe their job, their children, their house, car, husband, maybe their wardrobe, they always dress so nice, their bank account, or maybe they have a position of authority over you and you envy that, whatever it is. When we envy them and don't take care of it, we leave that inside and we let it sit inside, it will turn from envy to anger. Ecclesiastes 7:9. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. The Bible tells us that we are foolish if we allow anger to sit inside of us. If we leave anger inside, eventually it will turn to bitterness, and bitterness is rotten. Remember that verse we just read a minute ago that said that it rots our bones? Bitterness starts deep inside within where no one can see it. Maybe it starts out as envy or maybe anger at someone, but if we don't forgive and we don't confess our sin of envy and anger, it will turn to bitterness and it will rot inside of you and will eventually come out. Just like that paint came seeping out when my sister and I lifted those paint cans, bitterness, once it has rotten inside of you, will come out. Now, it was bad enough that paint came out of those cans, but to make it even worse was how it spilled all over the floor and went over all the paint cans that were all around it, going everywhere. And just like that mess from that spilled rotten paint affected the other cans around it, so your bitterness will affect others around you. Wife, your bitterness will affect your husband and your home. It will affect your children. It will affect your grandchildren. Single mom, your bitterness at the husband who left you will affect those children that you are raising. Lonely wife, your bitterness at your husband for being a workaholic will affect your marriage. Grandparent, your bitterness at maybe what life has dealt you will affect your grandchildren. Christian worker, Your bitterness at that decision your pastor made that you don't agree with will affect your church. Probably the worst thing about bitterness is that it not only destroys you, but it also destroys those that you love. Hebrews 12:15, looking diligently lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. I'm warning you today that if you have envy or anger or bitterness inside, you need to get it out. It will destroy you if you don't get rid of it. Proverbs 28:13, he that covereth his sins shall not prosper, but whoso confesseth and forsaketh them shall have mercy. Two things I learned from that verse. First, people may not see that bitterness inside you, but if you keep it covered and leave it inside, the Bible says you will not prosper. Maybe, does life seem against you right now? Maybe nothing seems to be working right in your life. Why don't you check within and make sure that there is no unconfessed sin poisoning your life and keeping you from having a successful Christian life? Next, that verse taught me that it is not just enough to confess it to God, we must forsake it as well. We can't just admit, you know what, I'm bitter about something. We must also clean it out. Only then will God have mercy. That verse says, confesseth and forsaketh it. I will end with this. Bitterness hurts you and those around you. It does not necessarily hurt the person that you are bitter at. I have seen that with my own eyes. When I was a child, a lady got very upset at my mom for something she said. This lady had misunderstood my mom's intention and how she said this, and she got very angry about it. But my mom never even knew that that lady was very upset. And this lady stayed angry about that one thing my mom said and allowed that to stay within her for many, many years. We're talking 10 to 15 years. And about 10 to 15 years later, that lady got upset at something else and snapped some vicious, horribly mean words at my mom. And my mom asked, what is wrong? Why are you so upset? That lady started going off on my mom about how she had said something years ago and it had hurt her feelings and she was upset. And my mom couldn't even remember that incident until she started going into details and telling about when and where it was. But that lady had allowed one sentence to sit inside of her and destroy her from the inside out. For about 15 years, she had seethed in bitterness, and my mom had no idea. This lady's bitterness at my mom had not hurt my mom. It had hurt her. Oh, and not only her whole family has been affected by that. And still to this day, there is bitterness in that family. How sad. Don't let bitterness destroy you. Don't let it destroy your family and those all around you. Confess it. Forsake it. And then you will find mercy. I will never forget the valuable lesson on bitterness I learned from those old rusty cans filled with rotten paint.